Order. I will call Jenny Riddle-Carpenter to move the motion, and I will then call the Minister to respond. I remind other members that there may only make a speech with a prior permission from the member in charge of the debate and the Minister. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as it is as the convention for 30-minute debates. Order, order. Jenny Riddle-Carpenter to move the motion.
Chair, it's an honour to serve under your chairmanship, and I beg to move that this House has considered the potential merits of a levy on energy developers. On the Suffolk coast, communities and nature are facing a stack of separate, fast-moving, nationally significant infrastructure projects, NSIPs. These are new generation, multiple offshore wind grid connectors, major transmission reinforcement, multiple purpose interconnectors, and Europe's largest energy project, Sizewell C. We now have 6 NSIPs being built as we speak or seeking consent, all within a small 10-mile radius of my constituency of Suffolk Coastal. Each has been planned separately, but the impacts are felt cumulatively. Now, what I find absurd is that our planning system still examines proposals project by project, and they are not required by law to coordinate. My community is expected to host multi-billion-pound schemes simultaneously without any statutory tools or funding to force or enforce coordination between developers. I do need to say that since I have been raising the profile of this problem, Ofgem have been leading a coordination meeting with these NSIPs. But Ofgem's role is only to chair these meetings. There is no statutory obligation for these meetings to happen, and it only has come about because of increased pressure of the need for better coordination. Now, some improvements have happened because of these meetings, and that's welcomed, but I am arguing that we need to go further, much further. It should be enshrined in law that coordination between NSIPs is required where they operate in the same area. That is precisely why I tabled Amendment NC33 to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which would have placed a legal duty on energy developers in the same area to share information, coordinate and cooperate on design and construction, and take responsible steps to reduce cumulative impacts. Now, as I've said before, the failure we're experiencing in Suffolk Coastal is because the previous Conservative government totally vacated the leadership space when it came to our country's energy and biodiversity planning, and that void was filled by energy developers. They sat back and allowed developers to take the lead and bring forward proposals for totally unsuitable landscapes, all because it was cheaper than developing in brownfield sites. Now, we have been left with a series of uncoordinated whack-a-mole projects on the Suffolk coast. No brownfield first strategy, no shared corridor strategy, no binding requirement to coordinate construction schedules, no mechanism to prevent the same land being dug up twice, and no requirement to look at or assess the cumulative impact on nature and the environment. And it's not just me saying this. The Energy Security and Net Zero Select Committee report, Gridlock and Growth, highlighted the need for more strategic coordination in environmental impact assessments. It warned of unnecessary costs and delays from this project-by-project approach. The environmental impacts are assessed separately rather than cumulatively at habitat or seascape sale. In other words, what communities in Suffolk Coastal are experiencing is a national problem playing out locally, and this is exactly why I'm calling for legislation to fix it. The chair of the committee also told me that he agrees it's completely crazy when construction isn't coordinated, and he sees there's a real need to apply that not just to energy companies, but to utilities digging up roads and pavements for repairs or maintenance of gas, electricity, water as well, and construction projects. Now, I know the Minister for Energy Security has acknowledged public to me previously in debates and private to me in meetings that he agrees with me, and he believes there's a source of deep regret that the previous government did not do more to properly coordinate what has been a huge build-out of new and important infrastructure. He has challenged me before that the statutory coordination that I am seeking requires investment. Now, that's a fair challenge. So my response today is a proposal to meet that challenge and to set out my proposed energy infrastructure coordination levy. In simple terms, this is a levy payable by energy NSIP applicants designed to fund cumulative planning, shared mitigation and coordinated delivery in host communities. This would apply to all energy NSIPs, generation, transmission, interconnectors, and the payment will be triggered in 2 stages. A small amount when the application is accepted for examination, and secondly, the main payment when the development consent order, the DCO, is granted. The levy would be calculated using a hybrid model reflecting real impact drivers. Firstly, a base rate per gigawatt of capacity, a base rate per kilometre onshore cable, a base rate per substation or converter station, and with a cap and a floor to ensure proportionality. This aligns costs with scale and disruption, not simply capital expenditure. Now, crucially, the funds will be ring-fenced locally. Now, that's really important. I'll give way.
And I really appreciate my honourable friend for giving way and securing this important debate, because similar to my honourable friend from Suffolk Coastal, we have very, very similar issues in Caerfyrddin and in West Wales in general. And a levy is really important. And I note from a speech for cumulative planning, for mitigation, absolutely. And also I would add that community benefit, which is tangible for our communities, such as public transport, affordable homes. These are things that we don't have in rural communities, which a levy could absolutely support. And does my honourable friend agree with me that this is the way forward, not the piecemeal dribs and drabs that the companies are offering us?
Thank you, the honourable member, for her contribution. I'm looking forward to the Minister's wrap-ups and explanation too, but I do agree that this kind of whack-a-mole strategy that I've talked about a lot needs far better strategic oversight. Now, as I was talking about the funds, they would be ring-fenced locally, and that's really important. They would establish the dedicated Energy Coordination Fund for affected host areas, delivered through a locally accountable team. Now, this is really important because all too often developers are headquartered elsewhere. They do not live in these areas with the repeated traffic disruption and the cumulative land take. Local institutions, the local council for instance, must have the capacity to coordinate what developers currently are not required to do. The fund would support 4 priorities: shared modelling and evidence, design coordination, so corridor planning and joint construction scheduling, strategic mitigation of nature, so landscape scale habitat restoration and long-term management funding, and then fourthly, the community impact reduction, so for example, stronger traffic enforcement and transparent liaison. Now, alongside this, there should be a statutory coordination board, and independently chaired, that could set binding coordination objectives, and applicants must respond to this in their DCO documentation. Now, some may argue that the existing DCO obligations already address this. I can tell you explicitly that they do not. There is no statutory requirement for coordination between NSIPs. Happy to give way.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, can I commend the Honourable Lady for bringing this forward? I spoke to her beforehand and I'm really pleased that she's bringing this matter forward, and she's making certainly a name for herself in this place for being assiduous and hard working. But does the Honourable Lady not agree that the consumer cannot afford any greater cost of living increases in energy prices, and any levy cannot simply be handed on to the consumer, bearing in mind that energy costs are still a third higher than they were 5 years ago? Thank you.
Can I thank the honourable member for his intervention and contribution. Now, I've heard that said before, and indeed I was just coming on to that, so it's particularly well timed, and I suspect the Minister may have similar concerns. There may be concerns, as the honourable member set out, that it would increase consumer bills. Now, firstly, that grates on me when the National Grid reported an adjusted operating profit of £2.29 billion for the 6 months ending September 30th last year. Now, let's be clear. This is not about asking bill payers to shoulder more of the burden. It is about asking developers who are developing multi-billion-pound investment and returning substantial profits to absorb a proportionate cost and ensure coordination.
I'm grateful for giving way, because she's really come to the nub of the matter here, and it is that the energy companies who are building and installing the renewable capacity are making a lot of money out of it. And in my constituency, we have turbines where the owners are being paid for not generating anything, where we have the highest levels of fuel poverty in the country. Does that not speak to the fact that we need wholesale reform of the way in which that energy market is regulated?
Can I thank the honourable, my honourable friend for his intervention, and I'm sure the Minister will address that directly, and it's something that I know has been long talked about and continues to be as well. Now, I was talking about the incredible profits that these energy developers are making, but it also reflects a really simple fairness for me, that creating the disruption and generating the return should be funded through the systems and to manage this cumulative impact. But more importantly, and perhaps most importantly, Chair, it's not a case that this would lead to higher bills. Proper coordination would reduce bills, would reduce the duplication, prevent redesign and avoid the need for repeated construction and legal conflict. Proper coordination saves money. This is not anti-growth, it is smarter growth, and it is inclusive growth. Suffolk Coastal must not become the unmanaged frontier of energy development. So many in my constituency are pro-net zero, pro-investment and pro-growth, but we are asking the government to be pro-coordination, because what we have now is a fragmented planning system and eroding trust in the energy transition we all support. And if we are serious about delivering clean energy power at pace, we must treat host communities as partners in that transition, not as afterthoughts. We must do more to bring communities with us. So I am asking two things of the Minister today. Number one, a meeting with officials to examine this proposal. And number two, a departmental feasibility study into the merits of an energy infrastructure coordination levy and how it could both support growth and nature recovery. The government has already consulted on mandatory community benefits for low-carbon energy infrastructure. The question is now whether we go further by creating a clear levy model that funds meaningful coordination between clustered projects, like on the Suffolk coast, builds local accountability and capacity, and provides independent oversight, and delivers tangible community and environmental mitigation. Communities like mine are not asking for less ambition. We are simply asking for better coordination when projects are approved. If we get this right, we can deliver the green revolution in a way that communities support, nature benefits from, and the country can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Twigg. It's a pleasure to join this debate under your chairship, and of course you take a great interest in these issues as well. And so can I thank you and my honourable friend, the member for Suffolk Coastal, for bringing this debate. I think the honourable gentleman from Strangford was right that my honourable friend is making a name for herself as a hard worker in this space, and the meetings we've had on this have been genuinely really helpful and insightful for me, and I hope for her as well. And she is right to flag these issues. But I also want to just say at the outset that I also genuinely welcome the tone that she's taken since she's become the representative for Suffolk Coastal, because it's very easy in this place at this time to take a view that the easy answer is simply to say, well, we just shouldn't build anything anywhere ever again, and the country just continues to slide further and further backwards, as many on the opposition benches, who of course aren't here at all, would say. But actually, and she concluded her speech with this, which I think is worth repeating, that many in her community but across the country are pro the energy transition, they are pro-investment, they are pro-growth, they are pro-building the infrastructure, but rightly people want to know that that is well planned and that it benefits their community, and that is an entirely legitimate thing for communities to ask for and to be concerned about when that doesn't happen. So I think in that spirit she has absolutely raised this debate in the right way. I do want to just sort of pick up on a couple of things, but also just go back to why this infrastructure is so important in the first place, because I do think we often sometimes lose sight of why it is so important that we build energy infrastructure, but in particular, much of the transmission infrastructure that's in my honourable friend's constituency. And she raised the point around the previous government not doing this work, which I'll come back to. It's worth just remembering that since this government came to power, what we have sought to tackle is the energy trilemma around how we bring down bills and make the cost of living more affordable. And today's decision on the price cap is an important statement of how seriously this government takes that mission. It's also about how we deliver our long-term energy security in an uncertain world and how we move away from the volatility of fossil fuels that have cost us so dearly in recent years. And it's also how we build infrastructure that sets the country up for the future. Because this isn't just about connecting renewable energy, it's also about connecting the demand projects that will stimulate economic growth across the country. And if we don't do these things, all we do is harm that economic growth. So those decisions are incredibly important. Of course, I'll give way.
Minister, to learn from the experience of Shetland and Sulam Voe 50 years ago, where we took the most important step in relation to North Sea oil and gas coming ashore in Shetland, but we did it on our terms, so there was a genuine funding stream coming to the community. Left to the, if you give the whip hand to the corporates, they will always use it to their benefit.
I think a generation of lobbyists should look back at the history books of Shetland Isles Council at the time, because it is an extraordinary story, actually, of how they seized the opportunity that they knew then would be decades of North Sea oil and gas and have still benefited from it. And so I think he makes a very good point. But I think I was also going to come to his other point around the Viking wind farm, which I've seen in Shetland myself. The scale of it is extraordinary, but the community benefits are not where they should be, and the community isn't feeling enough of the benefits of it. And so it is really important that we do everything we can to reduce the constraints of wind so that local communities benefit directly from it, but also the country as a whole benefits from cheaper power on the grid, bringing down bills. Some of the actions that we've taken since we came into government, we've set up Great British Energy, a really important moment for us to say that for the first time in 70 years, we want the public to have some ownership stake in our energy future. We have delivered the most significant programme of investment in homegrown clean energy in our history. And just a few weeks ago, we published the Local Power Plan, the biggest shift in wealth and power in the energy space in British history, to make sure that these energy projects aren't just built by developers, but are actually owned by local communities as well, and that they have a real stake in their energy future. And of course, we also published the Warm Homes Plan so that we can have the biggest upgrade in homes in British history as well. Now, any infrastructure in the energy space or in anything else does bring local impacts, and there is no point in anyone pretending that those impacts don't upset people locally. But that's why we have an extremely rigorous planning system. It's why we take great care over decisions that are made, and why at times there is great frustration about the length of time it takes for planning decisions. But rightly, that's because the public should have a voice in that process, and that really important determination should take time. But we should always remember that the fundamental outcome is that it is the poorest in our society who have paid the price from our exposure to fossil fuels. And so the infrastructure we are building today is imperative, and it is important we move faster than ever before. Now, turning to a few issues. First of all, on cumulative impact, which my honourable friend and I have talked about before, and I have said repeatedly in the House, I think is a really serious issue. All nationally significant infrastructure projects must take account of cumulative impact, and they must take account of the range of those cumulative impacts. So not just the number of projects in a particular place, but the impact on other services locally, the impact on other bits of infrastructure. And they've got to submit a local impact report, which makes the examining authority aware of what those potential impacts are. That process must demonstrate that the applicant has taken seriously the concerns of local communities, and indeed, in applications where they haven't done that, it will count against them. And so consultation can't just be an exercise in order to tick a box, but there must be some demonstrable engagement with that process. Local communities do have a voice to take part in that process in early consultations, but also they can register through the Planning Inspectorate in the pre-examination stage. And all of these various issues are taken into consideration. But I also want to speak to the broader point around how we plan the future energy system. My honourable friend, I think, made an absolutely correct observation that the previous government, which now wants to run a mile from all the renewable energy projects that they developed and that we would support, I think I'm the only person still cheerleading the previous government's drive for renewable energy, because they certainly aren't. But what they didn't do was the design of the system and the coordination, so that we weren't building unnecessary grid to connect all of those projects. And my honourable friend's constituency is a good example of where better coordination at a strategic level would have got the same outputs from the system, but would have had much less impact locally. And so we are taking forward a number of things, and this is where we get into acronym soup that is the energy world. But first of all, and most importantly, the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan, the SSEP, the National Energy System Operator is going to be designing the first ever Strategic Spatial Energy Plan, which will be published by the end of next year. This is a really important opportunity for us to design the future of our energy system holistically, to take into account what can be built where, what the future energy system looks like for our needs, not now, but in the future. And as a result of that planning, design the most efficient network and transmission system that goes with it. And the centralised strategic network plan will follow that, which will be the holistic design of the network. Now, that is something we should have done 15, 20 years ago, but we start from where we are now, and we're determined that the future of our energy system is much more strategically planned and aligned. That will take into account local impacts and local views, and the regional energy plans in particular will take a much more granular look at a local level, engaging with local authorities and others to make sure that those really take into account local needs, but also the local opportunities. Those will be designed for Scotland, for Wales, and then for 9 English regions, bringing together various people to share a view on how that system should meet local priorities. I want to just be really clear about the scale of that work. The reason it is taking longer than perhaps we would like as a government is because that is the best way for us to plan long into the future what the system looks like, but also to give communities a real opportunity to shape that at an early stage. That's important on the planning of the system, but secondly on community benefits, which other members have raised. It is really important that we recognise fundamentally communities who host energy infrastructure are doing a service for the country. Now, infrastructure has to be built somewhere. There is not some third place where we can say, well, we're in favour of this, but please don't build it in my area. At some point, it has to go somewhere. And as a government, we're done with dither and delay, and we're going to build things again. But communities should get a benefit from that infrastructure being built. So we are committed to making sure that communities who host infrastructure will benefit. And as my honourable friend said, we announced a consultation on whether community benefits, which at the moment are voluntary, at the moment are a patchwork across the country, at the moment have different degrees of actual impact on communities, even where the funding is being delivered. We've consulted on whether that should be made mandatory, and we'll respond to that consultation soon. But we have also, in the Planning Infrastructure Bill, outlined the very first community benefits and bill discounts for people close to transmission infrastructure, recognising that often they have been left behind in the community benefits as pylons and transmission wires flow through communities. That scheme will be up and running soon, and that will directly deliver money off bills for those people living within 500 metres of new transmission infrastructure, but also millions of pounds of investment in communities next to significant pieces of transmission infrastructure such as substations and other things. That's really important for us to say that the grid is critical for the future of the country, but if you host that grid, you should have some benefit from it. And in July last year, we also published voluntary community benefits, guidance on voluntary community benefits to make sure that at the moment those are as robust as they can be. Now, in terms of the levy that my honourable friend raises, first of all, I'm very happy to meet with her to discuss this further, and I genuinely pay tribute to the fact that she has identified a problem and not to criticise other honourable members in this House, but instead of just bringing the problem to the House, she's gone and worked on a solution, and I think that is really important. I'm happy to engage with that and to look at it further. But there are two things that I want to just say clearly. First of all, the affordability crisis is this government's #1 objective. It is driving decisions right across government. It is what has led to a 7% reduction in bills from the next price cap period that was announced today. And every single penny that might find its way onto bills has to be scrutinised very carefully. And so I am initially hesitant at the idea of an additional levy, because although my honourable friend makes the point that these energy companies are making significant profits, and I wouldn't disagree with her on the scale of some of those profits, we should also be aware that unless government is going to take a power to cap those profits, it's likely that the cost of a levy would simply be passed on in terms of the cost of the projects themselves, and it's consumers at the end of the day that pay for it. So I do want to just sort of look into that point of her suggestion further, because every penny on bills makes a difference. And finally, on Section 106 agreements, in addition to community benefits arrangements locally, developers are also already required to mitigate specific local impacts through 106 agreements. They're legally binding agreements that are paid to local authorities. And together with these Section 106 and community benefits, we think there is work being done to invest and enhance in communities at the moment. But I'm very happy to look at what my honourable friend proposes in more detail. To conclude, Mr Twiggett, I just want to reiterate two things. First of all, my thanks to my honourable friend, but honourable members across the House who bring serious points and suggestions around how we don't just turn away from the investment that's necessary, but make sure communities are genuinely benefiting from it. And they are absolutely right to champion their local community and make sure everyone is benefiting from the energy transition. But secondly, we should not for a second think that building this infrastructure is optional or that it can all be done somewhere else. There are those in this House at the moment who believe that we can simply go backwards and deliver the energy security and affordability without a serious and credible plan to do that. It is not a serious proposition to say that we should simply tie communities to fossil fuels for longer. And so I really just want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. My honourable friend absolutely rightly makes the case that all polling that we have seen points to the country being in favour of the energy transition. Every piece of research points to the importance of tackling the climate crisis, not a future threat, but a very present reality. And infrastructure that for too long has been held up in this country is necessary to do that. It's necessary to get clean power, cheaper power to people's homes and businesses and to bring down bills. But it is also absolutely necessary to unlock the economic growth that this country needs. And there is no shortcut to doing that. We have to build the infrastructure that this country has been crying out for many, many years. So can I thank honourable members for their participation in this debate? Can I thank my honourable friend? I'm very happy to meet with her to discuss these issues further. As I said at the beginning, we take very seriously the role that communities play. We thank them for putting up with disruption when infrastructure is built. But we also thank them for hosting this infrastructure on behalf of the country, and we want to make sure they benefit from that. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the potential merits of the levy on energy developers. As many of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. To spend now to 4:30.